You might not realize it yet, but your money is dying, slowly, quietly, right in front of you. Every time you buy groceries, every time you fill your gas tank, every time you check your balance, and something just feels off. That's not paranoia. That's history repeating itself. The truth is, every empire that ever existed thought its currency would last forever. The Romans did, the British did, and now we do. But if you study the pattern, the rise and fall of every currency in history, you start to see the same tragic rhythm playing out again and again. It always begins with value and ends with illusion. It starts with trust. People trade gold for paper, believing that paper represents something real. Then governments promise to protect that trust until the promise becomes too expensive to keep. So they print more and more and more. And before you know it, the money that once built nations can't even buy bread. That's not drama. That's history. We've seen it play out in the Roman Empire, when silver coins were slowly mixed with cheaper metals. We saw it in Weimar Germany, when a loaf of bread cost billions of marks. We saw it in Zimbabwe, where people carried wheelbarrows of cash just to buy lunch. And we're watching it again, now only this time, it's digital, invisible, dressed up as progress. Every generation believes their money is different. Every generation is wrong. This video isn't about fear. It's about understanding what's coming and what to do before your money and the world's trust in it becomes worthless. Because history doesn't just warn us, it teaches us. And those who listen early enough always end up owning what everyone else suddenly needs. Let's start from the beginning. Money, real money, has always followed the same cycle. It begins as something of value, then it becomes a promise, and finally, it becomes a lie. It's the most consistent pattern in economics, and yet almost nobody sees it until it's too late. When you look back at history, the story always starts with sound money, something tangible, scarce, and trusted. Gold, silver, salt, land. These things couldn't be created out of thin air. But as societies grew and trade expanded, carrying gold became inconvenient. So people created receipts for gold, paper notes that represented real metal stored somewhere safe. That's the birth of paper money. At first, it worked perfectly. You could walk into a bank, hand over your paper, and receive gold. Trust was strong. Commerce flourished. But here's where human nature always ruins the equation. The people in power, kings, emperors, governments, eventually realize they can print more paper than they have gold to back it. And since nobody checks, they get away with it. Until one day, the illusion breaks. In ancient Rome, emperors diluted the silver in coins to fund their wars. In the early 1900s, America printed over its reserves during wartime, breaking the link between the dollar and gold. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon officially ended the gold standard altogether, marking the moment when money became just paper, no longer tied to anything of value, only to trust. And trust, once broken, can't be printed back into existence. This cycle, from gold to paper to nothing, has destroyed economies, wiped out savings, and rewritten empires. And yet, every time people act surprised, they always think our leaders wouldn't let that happen. But history shows that when a system runs on debt and denial, collapse isn't an accident. It's a deadline. And right now, we're closer to the deadline than we think. Because our modern money, your digital dollars, your savings, your investments, they're all backed by the same thing that failed every time before. Faith. Faith that governments will act responsibly. Faith that printing solves problems. Faith that numbers on a screen mean stability. But faith alone doesn't hold value. Scarcity does. And when you print trillions out of thin air, you don't make people richer. You just make the illusion more expensive. Let's talk about one of the biggest lies people live under today, the illusion of wealth. You see, money itself doesn't make you rich. It used to when it represented something real like gold or tangible value. But today, money is just numbers on a screen, and those numbers only mean something because everyone pretends they do. Most people walk around thinking they're doing well because their salary increased, or their bank balance has more zeros than last year. But what they don't realize is the number of zeros doesn't matter if those zeros buy less every single year. It's like being proud that your Monopoly money stack got bigger while the game board is on fire. When governments print trillions, the prices of things you need to survive quietly rise. The $100 in your wallet last year now buys you $80 worth of stuff. But you don't feel the robbery because it's silent. Inflation doesn't take your money, it takes your time. The hours you spent earning that cash are worth less. That's how most people's wealth disappears without them ever noticing. And it's always the middle class that suffers. The rich own assets, things that rise in value when money falls. The poor don't have much to lose. But the middle class, they save, they trust the system. And every time the system inflates, it quietly transfers their stored effort to those who control the money printer. Think about it. If printing more money made everyone richer, every country could solve poverty overnight. But it never works that way, because wealth isn't created by printing. It's created by producing something of value. When you print more money without producing more goods, you're just increasing the number of claims on the same pie. The pie doesn't get bigger, your slice just gets thinner. That's why people like Warren Buffett and Robert Kiyosaki always say, don't save money. Save assets, because money is designed to lose value. The system rewards those who understand that and punishes those who don't. We live in a world where the rich hold assets, and the average person holds paper, and the paper is burning. So when you see headlines like the economy is booming or markets at all-time highs, don't assume it means people are getting richer. It often means the currency is getting weaker. Let me give you a quick example. In 1971, when the U.S. left the gold standard, an ounce of gold was $35. Today, it's over $2,000. The gold didn't become more valuable. The dollar became weaker. That's what inflation looks like when you zoom out. The world keeps playing this same cycle. Print more money, devalue it, repeat. And the scary part is each cycle is getting shorter. Each time the crash comes faster. If history has taught us anything, it's this: money always returns to its true value, zero. That's not pessimism. It's a mathematical truth. The illusion of wealth keeps the average person calm, distracted, and obedient. But once you understand it, you start preparing for the storm. Next, we'll step into history's warnings. The times when ordinary people realized, too late, that their money had become paper in a world that demanded value. Listen closely to what history keeps whispering to us. It isn't shouting headlines, it's offering examples. Small, ordinary decisions that turned into survival or ruin. We'll look at 3 painful lessons from the past: Germany in the 1920s, Zimbabwe in the 2000s, and Argentina across decades. Each one shows a different face of the same end, a currency that stops doing what money is supposed to do. Imagine Berlin after the First World War. The war had eaten up savings, shattered production, and left governments with debts they couldn't pay. In the early 1920s, the German mark began to lose meaning. At first, it was a nuisance. Prices rose, people grumbled. Then it became grotesque. Salaries paid in the morning were almost worthless by the afternoon. Workers were paid several times a day so they could rush out and buy bread before the price climbed again. Shops closed early because it was impossible to keep prices updated. People carried sacks of banknotes. Savings evaporated not with a crash, but with 1,000 tiny daily cuts. What did ordinary people do? Some rushed to hoard goods of flour, coffee, fuel. Others fled savings accounts for hard assets, small plots of land, jewelry, anything that felt real. The ones who had ties to agricultural production or foreign currency held on. The ones who trusted the promise of the banknotes lost decades of work. It was not heroics that saved people. It was common sense. Put value into things that cannot be printed. Fast forward to southern Africa, to Zimbabwe in the late 2000s. Here the collapse looked different in scale but similar in spirit. Hyperinflation pushed prices into the millions, then billions, then trillions. At its peak, the government issued ever larger denominations, 100 billion, then a trillion, but the paper itself couldn't keep up with the speed of the fall. Businesses stopped pricing in the local currency. They priced in foreign currency, in rand and dollars, in whatever could hold value overnight. Ordinary Zimbabweans adapted in ways that were practical and brutal. They became barter experts, trading food for services, fuel for repairs. Some turned to gold and foreign currencies. Others emigrated. The middle class, which had kept modest savings, found themselves stripped of security. The lesson was the same as Germany's. When the currency fails, real value migrates to things people can use or accept without paperwork: food, foreign money, land. Those who acted early and converted savings into tangible resources kept their lives intact. Those who delayed and trusted institutions were wiped out. Then there's Argentina, a country that has lived through currency degradation more than once. The lessons there are long and repetitive: cycles of runaway inflation, debt defaults, policy resets, and social pain. People learned certain habits out of necessity. Keep savings in stable foreign currency when possible. Move wealth into real estate or durable goods, and use informal networks to protect value. But the story is complicated because political resets bring hope and temporary stability, and each temporary fix convinces people they've escaped the pattern. That's the cruel part. The system offers small recoveries, and those recoveries lull people back into trusting the same structures that will, in time, fail again. Across these three cases, notice the same human patterns. When money falters, the first instinct is denial. This will pass. The second instinct is panic. People rush to secure what they can. The wise instinct is adaptation. Move value into what cannot be created by a printing press or a policy change. So, when we talk again about what to buy or where to place your life's work, we're not speaking from alarmism. We are reading the past like a manual, not to scare you, but to show you the practical playbook. The people who survived did small, steady things that preserved usability, not headlines. They turned numbers into things people needed. Now keep that image with you: the wheelbarrows, the empty shelves, the families trading at the door. Hold it while we look at today's world, where the same pattern is dressed up in data and digital screens. Because if history taught us anything, it's that the present will only differ from the past in its style, not its outcome. Let's move on and see how the same forces are shaping our time. Every empire thinks it's different. Every generation believes this time the rules have changed. And that's the first illusion, the belief that collapse happens suddenly, when in reality, it happens slowly, while everyone is still smiling. People don't ignore collapse because they're stupid. They ignore it because they're human. Our brains are wired to protect comfort. When something threatens that comfort, like inflation, debt, or digital control, we simply tell ourselves, it'll fix itself. We dismiss every warning sign, because accepting them means admitting our foundation is cracking. So we scroll, we shop, we distract ourselves, until one day, the shelves are empty, and the same neighbors who laughed at the warnings are the first to panic, and they'll ask, how did this happen so fast? But it didn't happen fast. It happened quietly, while everyone was busy feeling normal. The truth is, people would rather be wrong with the crowd than right alone. That's why, In every collapse, from Weimar Germany to the 2008 crash, the few who acted early were mocked, and the many who waited were destroyed. It's human gravity, the pull to stay with the group, even when the cliff is just inches away. But here's something most people never realize. The biggest advantage in a collapse isn't money, it's clarity. When fear spreads, clarity becomes gold. When chaos reigns, calm is the new currency. Preparation isn't about panic, it's about peace. It's the ability to look at a burning system and say, I knew this was coming, and I'm ready. That mindset separates those who adapt from those who freeze. Every collapse ends the same way, not with the end of the world, but with the beginning of a new one. And those who keep their minds steady through the storm become the architects of what comes next. Because, in the end, the collapse of money isn't just about economics. It's a mirror showing us what we truly value and how easily we forget. Here's the truth about every economic collapse in history. Value never disappears. It only moves. When currencies fall, the people who survive aren't always the richest, but those who understood where value hides when money dies. And no, it's not just gold and Bitcoin. It's everything that can't be printed, hacked, or inflated away. Let's break it down. 1. Hard assets. The first layer of survival is tangibility, something you can touch, hold, or defend. Land, not the overpriced, speculative kind, but productive land that can grow food or host value. Precious metals, gold, silver, not because they're magical, but because they've outlasted every currency that claimed to replace them. And then Bitcoin, the digital heir to sound money, not the hype version, the principle behind it, a form of value not controlled by any government, not devalued by political decisions. In every financial reset, those who owned real assets, whether it was farmland in Zimbabwe, gold coins in Argentina, or Bitcoin in 2013, had something to stand on when the paper burned. 2. Essential resources. Next, resources that matter when convenience disappears, because wealth is useless when shelves are empty. That means clean water systems, energy sources, food storage, and medical access. Not apocalypse stockpiles, just intelligent preparation. In Weimar Germany, families who owned bakeries didn't need wheelbarrows of cash to eat. In Venezuela, those who could trade bottled water and fuel weren't poor, they were powerful. Wealth shifts from digits to necessities when systems fail. 3. Skills. When money collapses, skills become currency. You don't need to be a farmer, but knowing how to fix, repair, build, trade, or teach is worth more than a savings account when the lights flicker. Every crisis creates new economies. The informal, the barter-based, the underground. Those who can provide value without relying on institutions don't go broke. They evolve. And in a digital world, skills that move online, design, writing, coding, media, consulting, these also become tools of independence. When systems lock down, knowledge stays free. 4. Information and access. Finally, and this one's underrated, information. The right information, at the right time, is a form of wealth. In 2008, some saw the crash coming and moved early. In 2020, some saw the lockdown trends and adapted online before others. And every day, some notice patterns, not because they're lucky, but because they study the tides before the storm. Access to networks, mentors, alliances becomes priceless when institutions fail. Because, while most people panic alone, a few cooperate smartly. Information builds resilience. It's the only asset that compounds even in chaos. So, what should you buy before your money becomes worthless? Not just gold or crypto. Buy independence. Buy knowledge. Buy the kind of assets that no policy, no bank, and no printing press can erase. Because history doesn't repeat, it just changes the interface. The rules stay the same. When the system crumbles, the prepared inherit what's left. The fall of money has never been the end of the world. It's only ever been the end of an illusion, because money, at its core, is just a story we all agree to believe in. And when that story stops making sense, the system resets itself, painfully, violently, but inevitably. The Roman Empire collapsed, Weimar collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed, and each time people said, "This is the end." But it never was. Life went on. A new story began. The question isn't whether collapse is coming. It's whether you'll be ready when it does. Being ready doesn't mean hoarding or hiding. It means understanding value. It means knowing that real wealth isn't printed. It's preserved. It's stored in things that last. And people who know what to do when things don't. Your goal isn't to outsmart the system. It's to outlast it. To stand still while everything else shakes. To be the calm voice when everyone else is screaming. History rewards those who prepare quietly, who build when others waste, who learn when others laugh. Because when the illusion finally breaks, they're the ones holding what's real. So don't wait for the world to burn before learning what value really means. Start now while it still feels unnecessary, because by the time everyone else notices, it's already too late. The collapse of money isn't a tragedy, it's a teacher. And if you listen closely enough, you'll realize it's been trying to warn us all along.